At 1:13 in the morning, my son slammed my late wife's cedar recipe box onto the counter of a 24-hour gas station and told two deputies, a cashier, and my trembling granddaughter that I was a confused old man who owed him $20,000. The rain was coming down sideways that night, hard enough to make the glass doors shake. My son, Caleb, stood under those buzzing white lights in a wool coat he could not afford, with his jaw tight and his eyes cold. His daughter, Nora, was behind him in pink pajama pants and winter boots with no socks. She was 10 years old, thin as a fence rail, and she had both arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. "Dad," Caleb said, but he said it like a warning, not like a son. "You can end this right now. Transfer the money." I looked at the recipe box on the counter. It had belonged to my wife, Eleanor. She had kept it beside the stove for 42 years. It smelled faintly of cinnamon, pencil lead, and the lavender hand lotion she used before the cancer took her. On the lid, she had carved 3 small lines with a butter knife back in 1986. One for me, one for Caleb, and one for the baby we lost before she ever had a name. Caleb had always called it junk. That night, he called it worse. "You sit in that house with a dead woman's trash," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "while your own family falls apart. You don't care about Nora, you don't care about me. You just care about pretending Mom is still alive." The cashier lowered her eyes. One deputy shifted his weight. The other kept his hand near his belt but said nothing. I did not raise my voice. I had spent 36 years as a bank auditor. I knew what panic looked like when it came dressed as anger. I had seen men with clean suits and dirty books pound their fists on conference tables. I had seen women cry over missing accounts they had quietly emptied themselves. And I had learned one thing the hard way. People who demand money in the middle of the night are almost never asking for help. They are trying to stop something from catching up with them. "If the money is for Nora," I said, "then show me the bill." Caleb smiled in that tired, polished way he used at church fundraisers. There he goes, the auditor. Always needing papers, always needing proof. "You're 71, Dad. You don't understand what's happening anymore." Nora looked at me then. Her eyes were red, but she did not cry. She just whispered, "Grandpa, please don't let him take Grandma's box." That was the first time I understood the box was not the thing Caleb wanted. It was the thing he feared. If you've ever been made to feel small by your own family, stay with me. Because what happened next changed everything I believed about love, blood, and justice. My name is Warren Bellamy. I was born in northern Ohio, raised by a father who fixed tractors and a mother who ironed church tablecloths for free. I married Eleanor May Bellamy when I was 26 and she was 24. She laughed with her whole face. She sang off-key while washing dishes. She could take a nearly empty pantry and turn it into supper for 6. We had one son, Caleb. For most of his life, I believed he was the best thing I had ever done. That is a hard sentence to say now. Caleb was bright. Not gentle exactly, but bright. He knew how to enter a room and make people look at him. Teachers called him a leader. Coaches called him determined. Eleanor called him our storm cloud with sunshine behind it. I used to think that meant he was complicated. Now I think she saw something I refused to see. When Caleb was little, he would break a toy and blame the chair. He would lose his lunch money and blame the bus driver. He would say sorry with tears in his eyes, then do the same thing again the next week. Eleanor worried. I excused it. I told her boys tested edges. I told her he would soften when life taught him. Life taught him. He learned the wrong lessons. By the time he was 42, Caleb had become the kind of man people in our town admired from a distance. He owned a small consulting company called Bright Path Family Solutions, though nobody could clearly explain what it did. He spoke at charity breakfasts. He posted pictures of himself handing oversized checks to youth programs. He wore tailored jackets and used words like impact, legacy, and community trust. People shook his hand and told me I must be proud. I always said yes. What else does a father say when his son is standing 10 feet away pretending to be the man you prayed he would become? Caleb had been married twice. His first wife, April, died when Nora was 4. A delivery truck crossed the center line on County Road 12 and hit her little blue car on a Tuesday afternoon. April was a quiet woman who worked in a dental office and remembered everybody's birthday. After she died, there was an insurance settlement for Nora. Not a fortune, but enough to help with college and care. A trust was set up. Caleb told me it was all handled. 2 years later, he married Daphne. Daphne had the kind of voice that stayed sweet even when the words were sharp. She called me Warren instead of Dad, which was fine with me. She wore white coats in winter and took pictures of coffee cups by windows. She was careful around people who mattered and careless around people who did not. Eleanor saw it first. She watches Nora like Nora is an unpaid bill. My wife told me one evening, I remember standing at the sink, rinsing a plate. That's a hard thing to say. Eleanor wiped her hands on a towel. Hard things are still true. That was my Eleanor. Soft hands, clear eyes. Before she died, she made me promise 3 things. Keep the porch light working. Don't let Caleb rush me into signing anything. And if Nora ever came to me scared, I was to listen before I spoke. At the time, I thought she meant ordinary fear. Bad dreams, school trouble, missing her mother. I did not know Eleanor had already started preparing for a night like the one at the gas station. The cedar recipe box was part of our family before we had a family. Eleanor bought it at a flea market for $4 the month after we married. The latch never closed right. The left back corner had a burn mark from the year Caleb tried to make pancakes and set a dish towel on fire. Inside were index cards in Eleanor's handwriting. Meatloaf with oats, church basement chili, lemon bars for grief, midnight biscuits. That last one was a joke between us. When Caleb was a baby and would not sleep, Eleanor would make biscuits at midnight just to calm herself down. She said dough made more sense than babies. Later, whenever life got hard, she would say, Warren, this feels like a midnight biscuit problem. Meaning, do not panic, wash your hands, measure carefully, wait for the heat to do its work. After she died, I kept the box on the kitchen counter. Some men keep ashes, some keep rings. I kept recipes I could not cook without crying. Caleb hated seeing it. You need to move on, he told me once. I said, I am moving, just slower than you. He laughed like that was sad. In the months before the gas station, Caleb visited more often than usual. He brought forms. He brought brochures. He brought Daphne. They sat in my living room under Eleanor's framed watercolor of Lake Erie and spoke in voices people use around hospital beds. We're worried about you, Daphne said. You forgot to pay the electric bill, Caleb added. I changed providers, I said. You got lost driving to the dentist. The dentist moved offices. You gave the mailman a check meant for the water company. I put it in the wrong envelope and corrected it before pickup. Caleb leaned back, tired and noble. Dad, listen to yourself. It's always an explanation. That is how gaslighting works when it comes from family. They take ordinary human mistakes, stack them like bricks, and build a cage around you. Daphne put her hand over mine. Her nails were pale pink and perfect. We only want to protect you from people taking advantage, she said. I looked at Caleb. Who? He did not blink. Sometimes the danger is closer than you think. I should have heard the confession in that sentence. I did not. Then came the charity dinner. It was held at the County Arts Center on a Friday night. Caleb had asked me to attend because BrightPath was receiving a community service award. I did not want to go, but Nora called me herself and asked if I would sit near the front so she could see me when she sang with the school choir. So I went. I wore the gray suit Eleanor had bought me for our 40th anniversary. I put her wedding ring on a chain under my shirt, something I had done since the funeral. And because Nora had asked me to bring something Grandma, I tucked one recipe card into my jacket pocket. Lemon bars. Nora liked touching Eleanor's handwriting. The place was full of soft lights and round tables. Caleb moved through the room like a mayor. Daphne smiled beside him with one hand on his arm. On the stage, a banner read, Building Safe Futures for Children. Nora stood with the choir in a blue dress that was too thin for winter. She kept looking toward the door. When she saw me, her face changed. That little change was worth the whole night. After the choir sang, Caleb gave a speech. He talked about children who needed stability. He talked about families in crisis. He talked about how some older relatives cling to control and make healing harder for the next generation. People nodded. Then he looked right at me. My own father, he said into the microphone, has struggled since my mother passed. We love him, we honor him. But we also know when memory becomes a prison, the whole family suffers. The room went quiet in that awful way rooms do when everybody wants to hear, but nobody wants to be caught listening. I felt heat climb my neck. Caleb smiled sadly. We are taking steps as a family, he continued, to make sure Dad gets the support he needs and that Nora is protected from confusion and conflict. Protected from me. That was what he meant. I looked at Nora. Her mouth was open a little. She looked ashamed, though she had done nothing wrong. I stood up slowly. Caleb paused, still smiling. daring me to make his case for him. I did not speak. I took the lemon bar recipe from my pocket, walked to Nora's table, and laid it beside her plate. She covered it with both hands. Daphne leaned over and whispered something to her. Nora's face folded inward. Later, in the parking lot, I found the recipe card torn in half beside my truck, not thrown away. Torn, a message. I knelt in the cold and picked up both pieces. On the back of one piece, in pencil so faded I nearly missed it, Eleanor had written something that stopped my breath. If this card is torn, Warren, look for the one with nutmeg. I stood there under the parking lot light with rain beginning to mist across the asphalt, and for the first time since my wife died, I felt not grief but direction. Nutmeg. That night I went home and opened the cedar box. I knew every recipe, or thought I did. Eleanor had organized them by no system any living person could understand. Desserts beside soups, holiday cards behind casseroles, a newspaper clipping for peach pie tucked in with meatballs. I searched until nearly midnight. There was no recipe with nutmeg in the title. Then I remembered Eleanor never wrote the obvious thing down. I started reading ingredients. Pumpkin bread, rice pudding, spiced apples, winter custard. 4 cards had nutmeg. On the back of the winter custard card, in Eleanor's small writing, was a phone number and 2 words, call Marisol. Marisol Vega had been a bank attorney years ago, before she opened a small elder law practice near the courthouse. She and Eleanor had served together on the library board. I had not spoken to her since the funeral. It was too late to call. The next morning, I did. Marisol answered on the 3rd ring. When I said my name, she went silent. Then she said, "Warren, did Caleb ask you for money yet?" I sat down at the kitchen table. "No, he will." "How do you know that?" Because Eleanor knew. That was the moment my house changed around me. The refrigerator hummed. The furnace clicked on. A crow landed on the back fence. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary morning. But my wife had reached across death and put a warning in my hand. Marisol told me Eleanor came to her 6 months before she died. Not for a will. Not for estate planning. Something different. She brought copies of bank letters, Marisol said. School notes. A statement from April's sister. And a small ledger she said Caleb must never see until there was danger. What danger? She was afraid he would try to get control of Nora's trust. And maybe of you. I looked at the recipe box. My hand shook. I am not proud of that, but it did, Marisol continued. She made a protection file. Not a lawsuit, not an accusation, just a record in case someone needed to act fast. Where is it? I kept one sealed copy. She kept the key to the full file. In the recipe box? I believe so. She told me you would know when to look. I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because grief does strange things when it meets proof. I didn't know, I said. She said you wouldn't. She said you loved Caleb too much to see him clearly. That hurt because it was true. 2 days later, Caleb came to my house with Daphne and a man named Mr. Platt, who introduced himself as a family care coordinator. He wore a navy sweater and carried a leather folder. They sat at my kitchen table without asking. The recipe box was between us. Caleb eyed it. Still worshipping the shrine, he said. I put one hand on the lid. What do you need? Daphne smiled. We need cooperation. Mr. Platt opened the folder and slid papers toward me. Your son is seeking temporary authority to help manage some of your affairs. Very common, very loving. I did not touch the papers. Caleb sighed. Dad, this is exactly what I mean. You turn everything into a bank audit. I was a bank auditor, and that was a long time ago. Mr. Platt tapped the top page. This would allow Caleb to communicate with your doctors, review bills, make sure no one exploits you. Who hired you? I asked. Brightpath works with families in transition. That was not my question. His smile thinned. Your son asked me to help. Daphne leaned in. Warren, refusing help only proves you need it. I looked at Caleb. Do you think I am incompetent? His face changed for half a second. Not sadness. Annoyance. I think you're becoming unsafe, he said. This ain't for whom? No one answered. Nora had come with them that day. She stood in the hallway with her backpack on, though it was Saturday. When Caleb raised his voice, she flinched. I noticed. Old habits do not leave a bank auditor. You learn to watch what people do when they think you are looking somewhere else. Daphne's foot tapping. Mr. Platt's finger covering the lower corner of the paper. Caleb glancing at the recipe box every few seconds. Nora not taking off her backpack. A child wears a backpack indoors when she is either leaving soon or afraid someone will take what is inside. Nora, I said gently. You want some cocoa? Caleb snapped. She's fine. Nora whispered. I can't have sugar. Daphne turned. What did we talk about? Nora lowered her eyes. Sorry. Something had shifted in that house. Not just money, not just control. Fear had moved in and hung its coat by the door. I told them I would have Marisol review any papers. Caleb stood so fast the chair scraped the floor. You called Marisol? Yes. His face went pale, then red. Daphne recovered first. That woman feeds paranoia. Eleanor was sick when she spoke to her. I stood too. Don't use your mother's illness to erase her mind. For 1 second, Caleb looked like the boy who had broken a window and blamed the wind. Then he picked up the recipe box. Maybe this is the problem, he said. Maybe all this old garbage is what's keeping you sick. Nora made a sound like a small animal. He opened the lid, grabbed a handful of recipe cards, and let them fall to the floor. Caleb, I said quietly. He stared at me. What? You going to cry over paper? I bent down and gathered them one by one. I did not trust myself to speak. Daphne said, this is unhealthy attachment. Mr. Platt said nothing. When they left, Nora turned back at the door. She looked at the scattered cards in my hands and mouthed one word, shoe. I did not understand it then. I would before sunrise. 3 nights later, the phone rang at 12:42 a.m. It was Caleb. Meet me at the Sunoco off Route 6, he said. Bring your checkbook. No. Dad, don't play games. I need $20,000. For what? For Nora. I sat up in bed. What happened? She needs placement. Professional help. She's been lying, stealing, acting out. Nora? You don't know her like we do. I swung my feet to the floor. In the dark, Eleanor's side of the bed looked like a country I could not enter. What kind of placement? A therapeutic school. Out of state. Deposit is due by 6. 6 this morning? Yes, that sounds like a scam. He laughed once. This is why we can't involve you. Send me the paperwork. You'll bring the money. Or tomorrow morning I file the petition and tell the court you are interfering with care decisions because of dementia. There it was. The knife finally shone. I got dressed. Not because I meant to pay him, because Nora was with him. At the gas station, I saw Caleb's black SUV parked crooked by the air pump. Daphne sat inside, phone glowing in her face. Nora was in the back seat, looking out at the rain. When I walked in, Caleb already had the recipe box on the counter. He must have taken it from my house during that Saturday visit, or maybe Nora had been forced to bring it. I never found out for certain. He did not greet me. He just said, 20,000 now. And then he made his scene. He told strangers I was unstable. He said I had threatened to cut off Nora's care. He said I was hoarding family money while my granddaughter suffered. He called my grief selfish. He called my caution cruelty. I stood there and let him talk. That is not weakness. Sometimes silence is the only place where truth can gather itself. Nora kept staring at the floor. Her boots were wet. One lace dragged loose. I noticed a folded corner of paper tucked into the side of her right boot. Show. My heart began to pound. Caleb pushed the box toward me. Open it, he said. Show them what matters more than your family. I did not move. He opened it himself, grabbed the cards, and threw them into the trash can by the coffee station. Nora cried out, no. That made one deputy step forward. Sir, the deputy said, take it easy. Caleb lifted both hands. See, this is what I deal with. Drama over recipes. I walked to the trash can and reached in the cashier. A young woman with tired eyes and a silver cross necklace quietly pulled a clean plastic bag from beneath the counter and handed it to me. Use this, she said. I looked at her name tag, Tessa. Thank you, Tessa. I gathered the cards from coffee cups and torn sugar packets. My wife's handwriting had grounds on it. I remember thinking how strange it was, that a man could feel more anger over coffee grounds on a dead woman's recipe than over insults thrown at his own face. Then Nora moved. It was so quick only I saw it. She slipped the folded paper from her boot and dropped it beside the floor mat near my shoe. Caleb turned. What are you doing? Nora froze. I put my foot over the paper. Enough, I said. Caleb stepped close to me. I could smell mint gum and rain on his coat. You have until 6, he whispered. If you make me do this the hard way, I'll make sure you never see her again. Then he took Nora by the arm and led her out. Daphne rolled down the SUV window as I followed them to the door. Warren, she called softly, the kind thing now is to stop fighting. Old men who fight usually lose more than they expect. They drove away. I stood under the gas station awning with the plastic bag of recipe cards in my hand and a folded paper under my shoe. The deputy asked if I was all right. I said yes. That was a lie. When they left, I picked up the paper. It was a recipe card. Not one of Eleanor's old ones. This was newer, cut from the back of a bank envelope. On the front, in Nora's careful child handwriting, were the words, Grandma's Night Pancakes. On the back, in Eleanor's handwriting, was my phone number and a message I had never seen. If Nora gives you this, call Marisol and then the police. Do not give Caleb cash. The account ending 4417 is not his. I stared at that card so long the rain soaked through my collar. The account ending 4417. I knew that number, not the full account, but the pattern. At the bank where I had worked, trust accounts often had internal endings that stuck in your mind because you reviewed them year after year. 4417 had belonged to a restricted minor trust. Nora's trust, Eleanor knew. She had known enough to leave instructions hidden in a child's shoe. I drove home. My hands were stiff on the wheel. Every red light felt too long. Every mile felt like a warning. I had just pulled into my driveway when my phone rang. The screen said, "None to caller," I answered. A woman said, "Mr. Bellamy? This is Officer Ridley with East Grange Police. We have a little girl here named Nora Bellamy. She asked us to call you." My breath stopped. "She's safe," the officer said quickly, "but she's very scared. She said her father is taking her across state lines before daylight. She had your number written on a recipe card in her boot." The porch light flickered above me. Eleanor's first promise. Keep the porch light working. I looked at the dark road where Caleb had disappeared. "I'm on my way," I said. At the police station, Nora sat in a plastic chair with a blanket around her shoulders. Her hair was damp. Her cheeks were pale. She held a paper cup of water in both hands, but had not drunk from it. When she saw me, she stood. Then she stopped and looked at Officer Ridley like she needed permission to love me. That broke something in me. Officer Ridley nodded. "Go ahead, honey." Nora ran to me. I held her as gently as I could because fear makes children feel made of glass. "I didn't mean to run," she whispered into my coat. "But Daddy said after the plane I couldn't call you anymore." "What plane?" She pulled back. "The place in Utah. Daphne said they fix kids who tell stories." Officer Ridley's face hardened. I looked at her. "Where is Caleb? We're trying to reach him." Nora shook her head. "He went to get the money papers." "What money papers?" She looked at the floor. I waited. Eleanor had taught me that with scared children, silence can be a chair. "You set it down and let them sit when they are ready." Finally, Nora said, "Daddy said if Grandpa signs, the judge won't ask about Mom's money. Her mother, April, the trust. By sunset, I would understand that the $20,000 was not the crime, it was the cover charge." Officer Ridley took my statement. I told her about the gas station, the demand, the recipe box, the threat. She asked if I had proof. I lifted the plastic bag of recipe cards. "I think my wife left some." That sounded crazy when I said it. Officer Ridley did not laugh. She said, "Then let's not lose them." At 4:05 a.m., sitting in a police interview room with bad coffee and buzzing lights, I called Marisol Vega. She answered like she had been awake already. "He did it?" she asked. "Yes. Is Nora safe?" "For now." "Listen carefully, Warren. Caleb filed an emergency guardianship petition yesterday afternoon. Against you." I closed my eyes. Marisol continued. "He's claiming cognitive decline, emotional instability, and financial mismanagement. He also filed a motion saying, you are interfering with Nora's treatment plan." "What treatment plan?" "I don't know yet. But there is a bank meeting at 9 this morning. Caleb is trying to access restricted funds for an emergency placement deposit. 20,000. Yes." Nora sat outside the glass wall, wrapped in the blanket, watching me with Eleanor's eyes. Marisol lowered her voice. "Warren, this is moving fast because he planned it fast. Emergency filings are built for real danger, but people abuse them. If the judge believes you're confused and Nora needs treatment, Caleb could get temporary control today. Of my money, of your decisions, and maybe enough authority to keep you away from Nora." I looked at the recipe box cards spread across the table. "What do? We use what Eleanor left." The first thing Marisol told me to find was a key. "Eleanor said it would not look like a key," she said. That was Eleanor all over. Officer Ridley let us use a small conference room. Tessa, the gas station cashier, had already called the station herself. She had saved the security footage before her manager could override it. She told Officer Ridley, "That old man didn't threaten anybody. His son did all the talking." I did not know strangers could become witnesses so quickly. I emptied the recipe cards across the table. There must have been 200. Some were stained. Some were folded. Some had grocery lists on the back. A few had been written on old bank envelopes. Just like Nora's card, Marisol arrived at 5:10 wearing jeans, a raincoat, and the expression of a woman who had been waiting years for a door to open. She hugged Nora first. Then she hugged me. Eleanor made me promise not to act unless there was a trigger, she said. What trigger? A demand for money at night, a placement attempt, or a torn recipe card. I thought of the charity dinner parking lot. Marisol's eyes softened. She knew how he behaved under pressure. I wanted to defend him. Even then, even after everything, that is the sickness of a father's heart. It keeps looking for the boy inside the man, long after the man has locked the boy away. We found the key inside a recipe for oatmeal raisin cookies, not a metal key. A safe deposit access tag from First County Bank, flattened and taped beneath a second index card so carefully I almost missed the seam. On the visible side, Eleanor had written, "Add extra raisins if Warren is grumpy." Underneath was the tag, a date, and initials from a bank officer I knew, MP. Martha Pruitt. Martha had run safe deposit services at First County for 20 years. She had retired to Arizona, but the bank would still have logs. Marisol smiled for the first time. Your wife trusted paper more than people, she said. No, I said. She trusted the right people with paper. At 7:30, we were waiting outside First County Bank before the doors opened. Nora stayed with Officer Ridley and a child advocate named Ms. Henson, who had been called in after Nora said the words, "They fix kids who tell stories." Those words had changed the whole temperature in the station. Marisol and I stood under the bank awning in gray morning light. I need to tell you something before we go in, she said. I looked at her. The sealed copy I have from Eleanor includes concerns about Caleb misusing Nora's funds over several years. Small withdrawals, reimbursements, invoices from companies that may not exist. How much? I don't know. Enough that Eleanor was scared. I thought of Caleb at school plays. Caleb at Christmas. Caleb holding Nora after April's funeral. Caleb accepting casseroles from church ladies and saying he would do anything for his daughter. What did he take? I asked. Marisol's face was kind, but she did not soften the answer. Maybe her safety. Inside the bank, the assistant manager tried to tell us safe deposit access required an appointment. I gave him my name. He recognized it. In small towns, old jobs follow you around like dogs. Miss Bellamy, he said. I didn't realize you were still involved with the bank. I'm not. I'm involved with my granddaughter. He went quiet. Marisol placed her bar card and paperwork on the desk. We need the box accessed under Eleanor Bellamy's authorization and the emergency protection memo filed with your institution. The assistant manager frowned. I'll need to call legal. Please do, I said, and ask them whether they want to proceed with a restricted minor trust disbursement at 9 while police are reviewing allegations of attempted custodial interference. He looked at me differently then, not as an old widower, as an auditor. Some parts of a man do not retire. The safe deposit box was small. Number 318. The metal drawer scraped when the bank employee set it on the viewing room table. Marisol unlocked it with Eleanor's tag and a bankmaster key. Inside was a blue cloth pouch, a sealed envelope, a small digital voice recorder, and a stack of recipe cards tied with red thread. On top was a photograph, Eleanor, April, and baby Nora on our back porch. April looked tired but happy. Eleanor held Nora like she was holding morning light. On the back, Eleanor had written, Warren, forgive me for hiding this. I was not hiding it from you. I was saving it for the day your love for Caleb might be used against Nora. I sat down. Marisol put her hand on my shoulder. I wanted to hear Eleanor's voice more than I wanted air. The digital recorder still worked. The first sound was a click, then Eleanor breathing. Warren, she said. I covered my mouth. Her voice was thinner than I remembered, but it was hers. If you are hearing this, then I was right, and I am sorry. I know you will want to believe Caleb has a reason. Maybe he does. People always have reasons. But reasons do not make a child safe. Marisol looked away to give me privacy, though there was none from grief. Eleanor continued. April came to me before she died. She was afraid Caleb was borrowing against money he had no right to touch. She made me copies. After she died, I watched. I found invoices. Camps Nora never attended. Therapy she never received. Transportation bills for trips she never took. Warren, it is not one big theft. It is 100 little ones. That is how he gets away with it. I closed my eyes. My son. 100 little thefts. She also signed a standby protection statement, Eleanor said. Not custody, not unless a court agrees, but it says who she trusted if Caleb ever tried to isolate Nora. She named us. If I am gone, she named you and Marisol to act. I know this will hurt you. But if Caleb asks for money in the dark, it means the dark has found him. The recorder clicked off. No one spoke. Then Marisol opened the seal envelope. Inside were copies of invoices, account statements, school counselor notes, and a notarized statement from April dated 9 months before her death. There was also a list in Eleanor's handwriting, not a list of recipes, a witness list: April's sister, Renee Whitaker, Martha Pruitt, bank officer, Dr. Simone Kells, pediatric counselor. Tessa was not on that list. She had become a witness by grace. At the bottom of the list, Eleanor had written one more name, Caleb Bellamy, then beneath it, ask him about Linden Transfer. Linden Transfer was one of the invoices in the file. It had billed Nora's trust for therapeutic transport support 3 times in 2 years. Each charge was under the review threshold: $4,800, $6,200, $5,900. I had seen that trick before. Keep theft small enough to look like administration. Marisol looked at her watch. It's 8:22, she said. The bank meeting is in 38 minutes. We did not have the full truth yet, but we had enough to slow the lie. Caleb arrived at the bank at 8:58 with Daphne, Mr. Platt, and a lawyer I did not know. He looked rested, which told me he had not spent the night worrying about his daughter. He saw me in the conference room and stopped. For 1 second, his eyes went to the blue pouch on the table. He knew maybe not what was inside, but he knew Eleanor had beaten him to the room. "Dad," he said warmly, "performing for the bank staff. Thank God. We've been worried sick. Nora ran off last night because she's been manipulated." Marisol stood. "Careful, Caleb." His lawyer whispered something. Daphne pressed her lips together. The bank's legal counsel joined by video call. The trust officer, a young man with nervous hands, explained that Caleb had requested an emergency disbursement of $20,000 from Nora's restricted trust for immediate therapeutic placement. I asked, "What is the name of the facility?" Caleb's lawyer answered, "Red Mesa Family Stabilization Center." Marisol slid a paper forward. "Red Mesa is not licensed to receive minors from Ohio without court approval." "We checked." Caleb smiled. "That's not accurate." The trust officer swallowed. "We have an invoice." "From Red Mesa?" I asked. He looked down. "From Linden Transfer and Placement Consulting." The room went still. Marisol placed Eleanor's note beside the invoice. "Ask him about Linden Transfer." Caleb's jaw flexed. I turned to the trust officer. "Who owns Linden?" The young man typed. The bank lawyer on the screen leaned closer. "According to state registration," the trust officer said slowly, "Linden Transfer LLC is registered to D. Bellamy Consulting." Daphne's face emptied. D. Bellamy. Daphne Bellamy. The $20,000 was not going to a school. It was going to my daughter-in-law's company. Caleb stood. "This is a misunderstanding." I had heard that sentence in audits for 36 years. It usually meant the truth had entered the room. The bank lawyer said, "No disbursement will be made today." Caleb leaned over the table. "My daughter needs care." "Your daughter is at the police station," Marisol said, "because she ran from you before daylight." His face turned toward me. There was hatred in it now, clean and bare. "You did this," he said. "No," I said. "You brought her out in the rain." That was the first time my son lost control in front of officials. "Not much, just enough." He pointed at me. "He is unstable. He is obsessed with my dead mother. He stole Nora from my custody." The bank lawyer said, "This meeting is over." But Caleb was not done. He looked at me with wet eyes that almost fooled me. "Dad, don't make me tell them what Mom told me before she died." My heart hit hard once. Marisol stiffened. Caleb lowered his voice. "She said she was afraid of you. There are lies that make you angry, and there are lies so cruel they make the room tilt." For a moment I saw Eleanor in the hospital bed, her hand inside mine, her wedding ring loose on her finger. I saw her smile when I rubbed lotion into her wrists. I heard her say, "You were the safest place I ever lived, Warren." Caleb had taken many things by then, but that lie reached for the sacred. I stood very slowly. "You can lie about money," I said. "You can lie about me. But do not put fear in your mother's mouth." His lawyer touched his sleeve. "Caleb." Caleb shook him off. Daphne gathered her purse. "We should go." As they left, Caleb leaned close enough that only I could hear him. "You think a dead woman's recipe box saves you? At 2 o'clock I'll have an order. By dinner, Nora will be gone. And by next week you'll be in a facility where you can count ceiling tiles." He walked out smiling. That was the second knife. The third was waiting at home. When I returned from the bank, a county adult protective services worker was on my porch, with a sheriff's deputy and a clipboard. The complaint said I had displayed signs of paranoia, emotional fixation, financial confusion, and aggression. It said I had frightened Nora with stories about her father stealing money. It said I had access to firearms, though I had sold my last hunting rifle 12 years earlier. It said I refused family support and might be a danger to myself. It was signed by Caleb. There is a particular shame in having strangers inspect your home, because your own child told them you were losing your mind. They checked my medicine cabinet. They looked in my refrigerator. They asked who managed my bills. They asked what year it was, who the president was, and whether I knew why they were there. I answered. Calmly, the deputy looked uncomfortable. The social worker was polite but careful. On the kitchen counter sat the cedar recipe box, now empty because most cards were still bagged as evidence. The social worker noticed it. What is that? She asked. My wife's recipe box. She wrote something down. I almost laughed. A box of recipes had become evidence of decline. That is how easy it is to make love look like sickness when the person explaining it has already decided you are old. After they left, I sat at the table and looked at the space where Eleanor used to drink tea. For the first time, I almost gave up. Not because I believed Caleb, because fighting your own blood feels like cutting off a hand to save the body. Then my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. It was a picture, Nora's bedroom, 3-bed. Open drawers, stuffed animals gone. Then a message. You have until 1:45 to withdraw your objections. Otherwise the court hears what Dad says about you. A second photo came through. My gray suit hanging in my closet, the one I wore to the charity dinner. Someone had been in my house. I stood so quickly the chair fell backward. I checked the back door. Locked. Windows. Locked. Then I saw it. The small basement window near the dryer was not latched. Caleb still knew the old trick from high school. He had not come for money. He had come for the rest of the recipe box. But he had missed something. When Caleb dumped the cards at the gas station, he thought he had destroyed order. He did not know Eleanor's system depended on disorder. The cards with legal meaning were not all in the box. Some were in the house. I remembered Eleanor sitting in her sewing chair during chemo, writing recipes slowly because her fingers hurt. She had asked me for old bank envelopes from my desk. I had teased her for being cheap. Good paper should do 2 jobs, she said. I went to my desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside were old envelopes, rubber bands, stamps, and a tin of paper clips. At the back was a bundle of recipe cards I had never filed because after Eleanor died, I could not bear to finish sorting her things. They were tied with blue thread. On top was a card for Storm's soup. There was no such soup. On the back was another message. Warren, if Caleb breaks into the house, the appointment card is in the metronome, the metronome. Eleanor had played piano badly but with confidence. Her black wooden metronome sat on the upright piano in the front room. It had not ticked in years. I opened the little front panel. Inside, behind the pendulum weight, was a folded appointment card from Dr. Simone Kells, pediatric counselor, written across the back in Eleanor's hand. Nora told the truth here. I called Marisol. She said, bring it, and call the police about the break-in. Will they believe me? They don't have to believe you, Warren. They have to document it. That became our rule for the rest of the day. Do not argue. Document. Do not accuse. Document. Do not beg. Document. Caleb's emergency hearing was scheduled for 2:09 p.m. in a small family courtroom on the 2nd floor of the county courthouse. The same courthouse where I had once audited escrow accounts after a clerk stole filing fees. I knew the smell of that building. Floor wax, old paper, and fear. Before the hearing, Marisol took me to her office. She had spread Eleanor's protection file across a long table. April's notarized statement was worse than I expected. It did not call Caleb a monster. It did not even call him abusive. It was careful, factual, and sad. She wrote that Caleb pressured her to sign trust reimbursement forms she did not understand. She wrote that he told her she was bad with numbers and too anxious to parent. She wrote that after Nora was born, he began taking her mail. She wrote that if anything happened to her, she wanted Eleanor and me notified before any major decision about Nora's trust, schooling, or residential placement. One sentence stayed with me. Caleb can sound loving while moving the walls closer. That was my son, written by the woman who had once loved him. Marisol also had school counselor notes. Nora had told Dr. Kells she was afraid to talk about money because Daddy says Grandpa will disappear if I make trouble. She said Daphne made her practice, saying she wanted to go away to school. She said she missed her mother but was not allowed to keep April's photos in her room because it made Daphne feel replaced. I had to stand and walk to the window. Traffic moved below like the world had not changed. And before I tell you what was inside that file, let me ask you something. If your own child tried to erase everything your late wife built, would you stay quiet or would you fight? I did not feel brave. I felt old. I felt ashamed that Eleanor had carried this knowledge while dying, and I had sat beside her talking about soup, weather, and whether the Browns would ever have a decent season. Marisol seemed to read that on my face. She protected you too, she said. From what? From having to choose before you had to. At 1:30, Officer Ridley arrived with a copy of the gas station footage and a preliminary report. Tessa had given a statement. The deputies who witnessed Caleb's demand had also confirmed he threatened to cut off my access to Nora unless I transferred money. At 1:40, Renee Whitaker arrived, April's sister. I had not seen her in 6 years. Caleb told us she had moved away and needed distance. She looked older, with silver at her temples and grief around her mouth. She hugged me hard. I tried, she said into my shoulder. After April died, I tried to stay close. Caleb blocked me. He told everyone I was unstable. I closed my eyes, the same words. Unstable, confused, unsafe. A family can become a courtroom long before a judge walks in. Renee had brought her own folder. Emails from April, text messages. A copy of a letter Caleb sent warning her not to contact Nora without permission. Photos of birthday gifts returned unopened. He erased us, Renee said. All of us who knew April. No, not erased. There is a difference. Raised means gone. Hidden means waiting. At 2:00, we walked into court. Caleb was already there, sitting with Daphne, Mr. Platt, and his lawyer. He wore a dark suit and a face full of sorrow. If I had not known him, I might have believed he was a worried son. And father trapped in a painful duty. Nora was not in the room. The child advocate had requested she remain in a separate waiting area unless the judge needed to speak with her privately. I was grateful. No child should have to watch adults fight over who gets to use her pain. The judge was a woman named Helen Rusk. I knew of her. Fair, direct, not easily charmed. Caleb's lawyer spoke first. He painted a careful picture. An elderly widower declining after his wife's death. A grieving grandfather interfering with medical decisions. A child in crisis. A devoted father trying to secure urgent treatment. A family friend, Mr. Platt, guiding them through support options. A minor trust that needed temporary disbursement. Then he used the word kidnapping. He said Nora had been encouraged to run away to my house. I felt Marisol's hand touch my sleeve under the table. Stay still. So I stayed still, Caleb testified next. He was good. That is a hard thing to admit. He cried without losing control. He said he loved me. He said he missed his mother. He said grief had made me suspicious. He said I spoke to Eleanor's recipe box as though she could answer. That part was not entirely false. Sometimes I did speak near it. Not to it, near it. There is a difference only the grieving understand. He said Nora had behavioral issues after her mother's death and resisted treatment because I told her. Doctors were paid liars. He said I had poisoned her against Daphne. He said the $20,000 was for emergency stabilization. Judge Rusk watched him carefully. Then Caleb turned toward me with tears in his eyes. I don't want my father punished, he said. I want him helped. Daphne dabbed her eyes. Mr. Platt nodded sadly. It was a beautiful lie. Then Marisol stood. She did not attack. She did not shout. She simply began placing documents on the projector one at a time. First, the trust agreement showing restricted use of Nora's funds. Second, invoices from Linden Transfer and Placement Consulting. Third, state registration showing Linden belonged to Daphne. Fourth, bank records showing prior payments from Nora's trust to Linden over 2 years. Caleb's lawyer objected. Judge Rusk allowed it for the limited purpose of evaluating credibility. That word changed the air, credibility, not guilt, not innocence. Just whether the people asking for power deserved belief. Marisol played the gas station video next. There was Caleb under fluorescent lights, demanding money. There was Nora in pajamas. There was the recipe box. There were my wife's cards going into the trash. There was Caleb leaning close to me, though the audio did not catch the threat. Then Tessa's statement was read. She said Caleb told me I would never see Nora again if I did not pay. Caleb stared at the table. Daphne looked at the door. Marisol then played Eleanor's recording. Only part of it. Enough. My wife's voice filled that courtroom, thin but steady. If Caleb asks for money in the dark, it means the dark has found him. Caleb closed his eyes. For the first time all day, he looked like a son. Not a villain, not a businessman. A son hearing his dead mother say she knew. That hurt me more than his anger. Judge Rusk leaned back. Mr. Bellamy, she said to Caleb, were you aware your mother had concerns about these trust transactions? Caleb swallowed. My mother was very ill. The judge's voice sharpened. That was not my question. No, he said. Marisol lifted one more document, April's standby protection statement. This is not a custody order, Marisol said. We understand that, but it is a notarized statement of a deceased parent's concerns and wishes. It names Warren Bellamy and Eleanor Bellamy as trusted contacts in the event of attempted isolation, misuse of trust funds, or out-of-state placement without independent review. Caleb's lawyer stood. Your Honor, this is emotionally loaded and legally limited. I understand what it is, Judge Rusk said. Sit down. He sat. Then the judge asked the question that cracked the room open. Where was Nora supposed to be taken today? Caleb said, a facility. What facility? Red Mesa. Do you have court approval for out-of-state placement? His mouth moved once before sound came. We were in the process. Do you have an admission agreement signed by the facility? His lawyer whispered. Caleb said, not with me. Marisol placed a document on the projector. This is the only invoice presented to the bank. It is not from Red Mesa. It is from Linden Transfer, owned by Mrs. Bellamy. Judge Rusk turned to Daphne. Mrs. Bellamy, were you to receive the $20,000? Daphne's sweet voice finally lost its sugar. It was reimbursement for coordination, for transporting a minor out of state, for helping a family in crisis. The judge looked at Caleb. Is your daughter a crisis or an invoice? Nobody breathed. Caleb's face changed then. The sorrow drained out. The polished man vanished. What remained was tired, furious, cornered. You all think this is simple, he said. You think I'm the bad guy because I'm the one making hard choices. Judge Rusk said, answer the question. My daughter needed to stop talking to people who fill her head. Which people? He looked at Renee, then at me. Then, finally, at the recipe box sitting on Marisol's table. Dead women, he said. That was when Renee stood up and whispered. You son of a... The bailiff moved. Judge Rusk called order. But the damage was done. Caleb had said out loud what the whole day had been hiding. He was not trying to treat Nora. He was trying to silence April. He was trying to silence Eleanor. And maybe, in some twisted place inside him, he was trying to silence the part of himself that knew they had both seen him clearly. Then Officer Ridley entered the courtroom. She handed a paper to Marisol, who read it and looked at me. What? I whispered. Marisol stood again. Your Honor, East Grange police have just confirmed an attempted break-in report at Mr. Bellamy's home this morning. They also recovered exterior camera footage from a neighbor showing Mr. Bellamy's son entering through a basement window at 10:18 a.m. Caleb shouted, That is my father's house. Judge Rusk's eyes hardened. It is not your house. 6 words, Sybil. Official. Final. It is not your office. I did not know how badly I needed to hear that. Not because of the walls, because Caleb had been walking through my life like ownership was birthright. The judge ordered an immediate freeze on any discretionary disbursements from Nora's trust, pending full accounting. She denied Caleb's request for emergency authority over me. She ordered an independent evaluation before any claim of incapacity could be raised again. She prohibited out-of-state placement of Nora without court approval. She granted temporary protective supervision, with Nora placed in my care for 72 hours while Child Services completed safety review, with Renee allowed visitation. Then she looked at Caleb. Mr. Bellamy, based on testimony and documents presented, I am referring this matter to the prosecutor for review of potential financial exploitation, forgery, custodial interference, and perjury. You are to surrender Nora's passport, birth certificate, and any trust-related records by 5 p.m. today. Daphne began crying, not soft court crying, angry crying. Mr. Platt stared at his hands. Caleb looked at me. For 1 second I thought he would curse me. Instead he said, Dad, please. There it was the boy, finally. But he had brought the boy out too late, and only to save the man. I wanted to go to him. I wanted to put my hand on his shoulder and say we would fix it. That is the terrible power children keep over parents, even when the children are grown and dangerous. But then I saw Nora through the small window in the courtroom door. She was beside Ms. Henson, holding the blanket around her shoulders, watching, waiting to see which promise I would keep. So I said the hardest true thing I have ever said to my son. I love you, Caleb, but I will not let you use that love as a hiding place. He looked down. The hearing ended. Justice did not feel like thunder. It felt like walking out of a burning house with smoke in your lungs and realizing you still had to learn how to breathe. Nora came home with me that evening. She sat in the passenger seat of my truck with Eleanor's recipe box on her lap. Marisol had returned the cards that were not evidence. The rest would be copied and preserved. For the first 10 miles, Nora said nothing. Then she asked, "Is Daddy going to jail?" "I don't know." "Do you want him to?" I kept my eyes on the road. "No." She looked at me. "Then why did you tell?" "Because telling the truth is not the same as wanting hurt." She thought about that. Daphne said, "Truth breaks families." I turned onto our street. The porch light glowed warm through the rain. "Secrets break families," I said. "Truth just shows where the cracks are." That night, Nora slept in Eleanor's sewing room because she said the guest room was too big. I found extra blankets and the yellow lamp shaped like a bird that Eleanor bought at a yard sale. Nora placed the recipe box on the bedside table. "Can it stay here?" she asked. "Yes." "Did Grandma know I'd be scared?" I sat on the edge of the chair. "I think Grandma knew grown-ups sometimes make children carry fear that doesn't belong to them." Nora touched the lid of the box. "She told me once that recipes are promises." I smiled, and it hurt. She was right. "What does that mean?" "It means somebody cared enough to write down how to feed you later." Nora nodded like that made perfect sense. Then she said a sentence I still hear on quiet nights. "Grandpa, can tomorrow be a day nobody packs me?" I had to look away. "Yes," I said. "Tomorrow nobody packs you." The investigation lasted months. Real life does not wrap itself up by the next commercial break. Caleb was not dragged away in chains that day. Daphne did not confess under a spotlight. Mr. Platt did not admit anything noble. But paper kept talking. Bank records showed over $83,000 in questionable payments from Nora's trust over 6 years. Some went to companies connected to Daphne. Some paid Caleb's credit lines. Some were labeled educational support, but matched dates when Nora was in public school with no services. A notary seal on one reimbursement affidavit belonged to a woman who had been in Florida the day the paper was signed. Forgery is often less dramatic than people imagine. A date wrong, a signature too smooth, a notary stamp used when the notary was out of state. A dead woman's concern written down before anyone wanted to read it. Eleanor had gathered enough to make denial difficult. April had gathered enough to make motive clear. Nora, poor child, had gathered enough courage to put a recipe card in her boot. That was the bravest evidence of all. Caleb tried one more counterattack. He told people I had turned against him for money. He told our pastor I was being controlled by Marisol. He told old friends I had dementia and hid it well. He posted a long message online about parental alienation and false accusations during grief. Some believed him. Not many. The gas station video had traveled quietly through town. Not online. Worse for Caleb. Person to person. Coffee shop to church kitchen to hardware store. People can forgive many things, but they remember a man throwing his dead mother's recipe cards into a trash can while his daughter cries. Tessa sent Nora a small card with a sticker of a sunflower. It said, "You were brave." Nora kept it in the recipe box. 3 months later, Caleb took a plea agreement on financial exploitation and forgery-related charges. Daphne was charged separately for false invoices through Linden Transfer. Mr. Platt lost his contract work after investigators found he had referred families to companies without disclosing personal ties. The court ordered restitution to Nora's trust. Caleb received probation at first, then jail time after violating conditions by trying to contact Nora through a fake email account. I wish I could say that shocked me. It did not. By then I had learned that people who survive by control often mistake consequences for cruelty. Nora stayed with me through the school year. Renee moved back to the county and rented a small house 10 minutes away. The court eventually created a shared guardianship plan between me and Renee, with an independent trustee managing Nora's funds. I was not trying to replace Caleb. Nobody replaces a father. But sometimes a child needs a safe adult more than a perfect family picture. We built routines: pancakes on Saturdays, library on Wednesdays, porch light checked every evening, therapy on Thursdays with a counselor. Nora chose herself. At first she hid food in drawers, then she stopped. At first she asked permission to laugh, then she forgot to ask. At first every car door outside made her look toward the window. Then spring came and she began planting marigolds in Eleanor's old flower boxes. One afternoon, we opened the cedar recipe box together to put the cards back in order. Or what we thought was order. Eleanor's logic still defeated us. Nora found a card stuck behind the inner lining. It had been there so long the paper had curved with the wood. On the front was a recipe for porch light cocoa. I had never seen it before. On the back, Eleanor had written one final note. For Warren and Nora, when the house is quiet again. Nora looked at me. My throat closed. She read it aloud because I could not. Love is not the person who demands you prove it at 1 in the morning. Love is the person who leaves the light on, keeps the recipe, and tells the truth even when it costs them. Nora held the card against her chest. Grandma wrote like she knew the future, she said. No, I whispered. She knew people. That evening we made cocoa from the card. Too much cinnamon. Not enough sugar. Eleanor would have laughed and fixed it without measuring. Nora carried her mug to the porch. The sky was purple. The marigolds were small but stubborn. Grandpa, she said, do you miss Daddy? I sat beside her. Yes. Even after what he did? Yes. Is that wrong? No. Missing someone doesn't mean you let them hurt you again. She nodded. Then she leaned her head against my shoulder. That was healing, not big, not cinematic, not the kind with swelling music and perfect words, just a child leaning without fear. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read those places like little porch lights in the dark. I still visit Caleb sometimes. People ask me why. I tell them because justice and love are not enemies. Justice protects the innocent. Love remembers the human being inside the guilty. But love without boundaries is just another unlocked door. The first time I visited him, Caleb would not look at me. He sat across the thick glass in an orange uniform, older than he had any right to look. For a while, neither of us picked up the phone, then he did. I picked up mine. He said, "Did you bring her?" No. His face twisted. "She hates me? She is healing." That's not what I asked. It is the only answer I have. He looked past me, jaw tight. "I needed help," he said. "I would have helped you." "No," he snapped. "You would have judged me." I thought about that. Maybe he was right. Maybe I would have judged. Maybe I would have asked for papers. Maybe I would have told him no. Maybe, to Caleb, those all felt like the same thing. "You stole from your daughter," I said. His eyes filled, but the tears did not fall. I was going to put it back. Every auditor in the world has heard those words. I said. The money was bad. But the worst part was making her afraid of the truth. He closed his eyes. For the first time, he did not argue. When our time was almost up, he asked, "Did Mom hate me?" That question broke through every wall I had built. "No," I said. "Your mother loved you enough to protect people from what you might do. That is a harder love than pretending." He covered his face with one hand. The guard said, "Time." I left with no victory in me. Only sorrow. But sorrow is not always a sign you chose wrong. Sometimes sorrow is the cost of not lying to yourself anymore. Years have not made that night smaller. I can still see the gas station lights. Caleb's hand on the cedar box. Nora's wet boots. Coffee grounds on Eleanor's handwriting. I can still hear my son say $20,000, like it was the price of family. But I remember something else more clearly now. I remember Nora's small hand dropping that card from her boot. I remember Tessa handing me a clean plastic bag. I remember Officer Ridley saying, "She's safe." I remember Judge Rusk saying, "It is not your house." I remember Eleanor's voice telling me the dark had found him. And I remember the porch light when I brought Nora home. That light is still working. Every evening, before bed, I step outside and check it. It shines over the steps, the marigolds, and the old welcome mat Eleanor bought, even though I told her it was too bright. Nora is 15 now. She is taller, louder, and no longer asks permission to take up space. She plays piano badly but with confidence, exactly like her grandmother. The metronome ticks again, uneven but alive. She keeps April's photo on her desk and Eleanor's cocoa card pinned above it. The cedar recipe box sits in our kitchen, not as a shrine, as a witness. Inside are recipes, Tessa's sunflower card, a copy of April's statement, Eleanor's note, and one folded paper Nora added herself last year. I did not read it until she told me I could. It says, "If I ever forget, this house was the first place nobody made me lie." That is the ending I choose to keep, not Caleb's demand, not Daphne's invoices, not the courtroom, not the shame. This, a child safe enough to write the truth and leave it in a box where promises go. I used to believe family meant blood staying loyal no matter what. I do not believe that anymore. Blood is powerful, yes. It can call you dad. It can wear your face. It can know where the basement window sticks and which memories will hurt you most. But love is different. Love does not demand $20,000 at 1 a.m. Love does not call fear treatment. Love does not use age as a weapon or grief as evidence. Love keeps records when memory is attacked. Love listens when a child whispers. Love stands in court with shaking hands and tells the truth anyway. My son thought I was weak because I was quiet. He thought Eleanor's recipe box was just old paper. He thought Nora was too scared to tell. He thought the truth had died with the women who saw him clearly. But truth has a way of waiting in ordinary places. In a child's boot, on the back of a recipe card, inside a broken metronome, under a porch light that somebody remembered to keep burning. And if there is one thing I want you to take from my story, it is this. When someone you love tries to make you feel small, confused, or guilty for asking for proof, do not hand them your peace just to keep the family quiet. Sometimes, the person calling you difficult is only angry because you are no longer easy to fool. And sometimes the thing they throw away in front of everyone is the very thing that saves you.